Hi guys, welcome back. Okay, so last week we were doing fractions and I showed you 3 problem-solving techniques. Now this week we're going to start off with this lesson with the 4th technique, and I think that this 4th technique is the most important technique in problem-solving with fractions. And the technique is called the cross method. Okay, so first of all, before I show you what the cross method is, I need you to be able to identify when you can use the cross method. You can use the cross method as long as it satisfies 2 criteria. The first one is there must be 2 quantities. And the second criteria is that the 2 quantities have to be on the same trend. So what does that mean? It means this, that if one quantity goes up, the other one must go up. If one quantity goes down, the other one must go down. So now let's have a look at an example of what I mean by this. Okay, let's have a look at our first example, okay? So it says here, for every 2 red balloons, there are 5 yellow ones. If I have 6 red balloons, how many yellow ones do I have? So basically in this question, what they're saying is they've got a bunch of red balloons and a bunch of yellow balloons, and then they're asking us that, well, if we have 6 red balloons, well, how many yellow balloons do we have? Okay, so now I'm going to tell you this, that we're going to use the cross method, and I'll tell you the reason why we're going to use the cross method. Well, let's have a look at this question again. We need to ask ourselves, well, how many quantities are there here? Well, you can see we have red balloons and we have yellow balloons, so we've got 2 quantities. Now then the question you have to ask yourself is, well, these 2 quantities, they have to have the same trend, do they? So let's have a look. If you've got red balloons and you've got yellow balloons, if you increase the number of red balloons, then you expect the number of yellow balloons to increase as well. If you decrease the number of red balloons, well, you'll decrease the number of yellow balloons. And so indeed, they have the same trend. So since we've got 2 quantities and these 2 quantities have the same trend, we think about using the cross method. Okay, so we understand now that we can use the cross method. Let's have a look at how we would use the cross method. Now, when you use the cross method, it's about setting out your working out, okay? So this is how you set it out. I want you to remember this. All right, what you need to do is you need to have 2 columns, 1 for each quantity. And then since here we've got red balloon as our first quantity and yellow balloon as our second quantity, what I'm going to do here is I'm first of all looking at the red balloons. So it says here we have 2 red balloons. There are 5 yellow ones. So 2 red, and you write an arrow, and the arrow means gives. So 2 red balloons gives 5 yellow ones. Okay, now the aim of the question is to find, well, how many yellows do you have if you've got 6 red balloons? So now, where do we put the 6 red balloons? Well, I told you before that when you set this out, the red balloons have to be in the 1 column. So that means that you write 6 red balloons underneath the 2 red balloons. You can't write it here, okay? And then you write an arrow, and then you got to find how many yellow balloons there are. So we'll call it X yellow, all right? So the aim of the question now is to find X, the number of yellow balloons. So how do we do that? Well, the setting out is done. Now what we do is we do the cross method. So we cross multiply, We get X, we times 2, so we cross multiply, 2 times X. Then we get 6, we times 5. 6 times 5, okay? And so now what we have is we have an equation in terms of x, and we can solve for x. So we write 2 times x, 6 times 5 is 30, okay? Now remember, we're solving for x. So that means that we want x by itself. That means we need to chuck the 2 across. And when we throw a number across the equal sign, we do the opposite. So you can clearly see that this is 2 times x. So the opposite of multiplication is division. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write 30 divided by 2. Remember, the fraction bar means a divide. So 30 divided by 2 is 15. And 15 what? 15 yellow balloons, okay? So what that means is that if we have 6 red, we have 15 yellow. So let's recap on what I want you to learn in this example. I want you to first of all understand why we can use the cross method. Here we've got 2 quantities, and the 2 quantities are in the same trend. Then the second thing is, once you've decided that you can use the cross method, to use the cross method, you must set your working out. The working out, the key thing is this, that all the quantities that are the same must be on the same side. So all the reds on this side, and all the yellows on this side. So once you set this up, then you cross multiply. Okay, so you get this times this, and it's equal to this times this. Okay, so that's a basic question. It's got nothing to do with fractions, but I just wanted to use this example just to highlight how we set out the cross method. Now let's do one where there's a fraction involved. Okay, so let's have a look at this one. If 2/3 of a number is equal to 12, I want you to find 1/4 of the number. So basically what we have here is we've got a number. We don't know what that number is, but what we do know is we know that 2/3 of this number is 12. The question wants us to find 1/4 of this number. Okay, so now I'm thinking, can I use the cross method? Can you answer me this? Do you think you can use it? Let's analyze. So if we want to use the cross method, we need two quantities, right? So let's ask ourselves, do we have the two quantities? Well, unlike this one's really clear. We've got red and yellow. Oh, what about this? We do have two quantities. Let me explain to you why. Here we've got 2/3. That is the fraction of the number. That's one quantity, the fraction. And then we have the quantity of the number. That's 12. So the 12 represents what the fraction of the number is. So we do have two quantities. One quantity is the fraction, and the second quantity is, what does that fraction represent? It represents 12. So do you understand? There are two quantities. Okay, then your question is, are they in the same trend? Well, you think about it. If I increase the fraction, well, its value will also increase. And so yes, they are in the same trend. So these two criteria satisfies. So that means that we can use the cross method. So now let's apply the cross method. The next thing is to do the setting out. So remember, all one quantity on the same quantity on the same side. So the first quantity we'll talk about is the fraction. So it's 2/3. 2/3. 2/3 gives me how much? Gives me what? Well, what is the value of 2/3? Well, we know it's equal to 12. So 2/3 gives me 12. Then the next thing is, well, what else do we know? Well, we're given that it's 1/4 of the number. So we know the fraction value we want, which is 1/4. And that gives how much? How much? What is the value of this 1/4? Well, we don't know, but that's what we want to find. So we'll call it X, isn't it? Okay, so now I've set out the working out for you, and that, to me, is really the hardest step, okay? Because the next step is just to cross multiply. So let's cross multiply this times this. So it's 2/3, you times it by X, and it's equal to 1/4 times by 12. And so now what we have is we've got an equation in terms of X, and we've got to try and solve it, okay? So now, 1/4 times 12, well, we know that we can cancel these two, so that's going to be 1, that's going to be 3. So that means 2/3 times X is equal to 3. Now, our aim is to find X, isn't it? So we must get rid of the 2 and the 3, and we must chuck it across. And when we chuck it across, remember, we do the opposite, don't we? So this is X. So the 3, leave it alone, okay? This 3 is at the bottom. It's at the bottom. So when you chuck it over, it goes on the top. This 2 is at the top. So when you chuck it over, it goes at the bottom. We've taught you how to do algebra before, so I hope you remember that, or equations. I hope you remember that, okay? Okay, so now what do we get? We just multiply, don't we? So we will multiply the numerators, the top numbers. So 3 times 3 is 9, divided by 2. So it's 9 on 2, or you can say it's 4.5. So what does that mean? What that means is that if 2/3 of this number, you don't know what the number is equal to 12, then 1/4 of this number will give you 4.5. That's its value. So this is an example of using the cross method where there is a fraction. All right, so now, I hope you guys there are getting all this, all right? So now let's go and look at a question that's extremely common in your school exams, where we're gonna apply this to practical uses, okay? So now, let's have a read. Example number 3 says, a tank is half full. I poured 27 litres into it, and now it's 7/8 full. How much does a full tank hold? So I think that with some questions, I think it's very important that you draw it, right? So now I'm going to draw it so you can see what's going on. I've got a tank of water here, and it says that, well, a tank is half full. It's only half full. There it is, half full. okay? And then what happens here is I get water and I want to pour into the tank. And when I pour the water, obviously the level of the water rises, doesn't it? And it says now, it's now 7/8 full. I'll write it here. It's now 7/8 full, yeah? And I poured in 27 litres. And the question says, yes, well, how much does the entire tank hold? Okay, so now you're thinking, well, I'm teaching you the cross method, so you're thinking, can I use the cross method? Well, my question to you is, can you? Think about it. The answer is yes. But why is the answer yes? Ask yourself, are there two quantities? There's two quantities here. There's the fraction of the tank, and the second quantity is how much the fraction is. So the volume, isn't it? It's the volume of water. So the fraction is one quantity and the volume of water is the second quantity. And we can see, now then we've got to ask ourselves, is it the same trend? Well, think about it. If the fraction increases, isn't the amount of water you have in the tank also increases? So if you've got, for example, a quarter of a tank and then you increase it to 3/4 of a tank, well, doesn't the volume also increase as well? So yes, these two quantities increases together. So the fraction increases, the volume increases. So now we know we can use the cross method. So now let's do it. Okay, so we write this. We say, well, what are you going to write here? What quantity? Well, you pick whatever quantity you want. It really doesn't matter. I'm going to write the fraction. So it's a half. Okay, and or a half. A tank is half full. Okay, and then what does it say? Well, I pour in 27. So the half gives me 27. Right? Wrong. Be very, very careful. A lot of kids do that mistake because, look, a half doesn't represent 27. So inside your head, you got to think, well, what represents 27? Well, think about that. Well, what represents 27 is this bit. And what is this bit in terms of a fraction? Well, if that's 7/8 and that's a half, the fraction is this minus this, isn't it? So I'll write here for you. The fraction is equal to what? It's 7/8 minus a half, and I think we all know how to do that. We've got to do common denominator. So it's 8, that's 7, leave alone, that's a minus. What do you need to times 2 to get 8? 4. So 4 times 1 is 4, and you get 3/8. So what is 3/8? 3/8 is here. That's 3/8, right? So now you can say this. Now you can say that 3/8 is this bit, and this bit is 27. So you can say 28 gives 27 litres. It is not a half gives 27, okay? So now what do you want? Well, do you want to find a half? No. Do you want to find 7/8? No. The question says they want you to find a full tank. And a full tank is 8 on 8. That's the entire tank. And you want to know what it is. So you write x. So remember, in the working out, you must remember all the fractions on the same side, all the volumes on the other side, right? Please don't put this on this side, this on this side, and mix it all up. Very important you don't do that. Okay, so that's the setup already. So now all we do is we cross multiply. So we get that times that, so it's 3/8 times x equals 27 times 8 on 8. Okay, so what's the first thing you do? Don't rush and find x. No, just take a step back. Look at this equation. See what you can do first. Well, we can see that 8 on 8 we can cancel because it's 1. So I'm going to rewrite as this. Okay, now that equation looks much better, doesn't it? So then we say, well, we want to find x. We chuck the 3 and 8 over. And when we chuck it over, we do the opposite. So it's 27. We times by 8's at the bottom. Chuck it across, it goes on the top. 3's at the top, chuck it over, it goes at the bottom. And so now we have x, yeah? So doing a bit of simplifying, you get 27 on 3, that's going to be 9. 9 times 8 is 72 litres. Okay, so what does 72 litres mean? Well, 72 litres is how much a tank holds, okay? All right, so what I want you to learn here is that I want you to learn that in this question, there are two quantities. One is the fraction of the tank, and the second one is how much water or what's the volume that this fraction represents, okay? So what this means is a half doesn't represent 27. 7/8 doesn't represent 27 because 7/8 is this much. 27 is just this much. So what represents 27? You had to find that first. What represents this is the difference between these two fractions, which turns out to be 3 on 8. So that means that 3 on 8 gives you 27. And you want to find a full tank? Or what's a full tank? A full tank is 8 on 8, okay? Gives you x. And once you set that up, just use the cross method. So I guess these three, these three are questions that highlight how to use the cross method, okay? And then I hope you understood that. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'll get you to copy that down, and then in the next video I'll give you 3 more examples just to make sure that we consolidate your knowledge on the cross method. Okay guys, so I'll get you to copy this down for me.